Okay, I'll go first. Let me say, we don't really need to be here. See, we've been married 5 years.
6.
5, 6 years. And this is like a checkup for us. Chance to poke around the engine, maybe change the oil, replace a seal or two.
Very well then. Let's pop the hood. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you as a couple?
8.
Wait. 10 being perfectly happy and 1 being totally miserable, or?
Just respond instinctively.
Okay. Ready?
Ready?
8.
How often do you have sex?
I don't understand the question.
Yeah, I'm lost. Is this a 1 to 10 thing?
But because, like, is 1 very little or is 1 nothing? Because, you know, technically speaking, the 0 would be nothing.
How about this week?
Including the weekend?
Sure. Describe how you first met.
It was in Colombia.
Bogota. 5 years ago.
6.
Right, 5 or 6 years ago.
In a world overflowing with movies, we need a hero. Someone to separate the bad from the good.
Sounds like a job verbal dioramas. Watches all the movies from comedy to drama. From the top roll sound, and don't forget the action. She'll watch until the end and then she'll give you her reaction. Movies you know, movies you don't. Prequels, sequels, remakes, and trivia and outtakes. Movies you know, movies you don't. Interesting stories, all the categories.
Hi everyone, I'm Em and welcome to Verbal Diorama episode 306, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is the podcast that's all about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't. And baby, you couldn't find the button with both hands and a map. And ain't that the truth? Welcome to Verbal Diorama. Whether you're a brand new listener, whether you're a regular returning listener, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for choosing to listen to this podcast. I am so happy to have you here, just generally, but also for the history and legacy of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Thank you so much to everyone who is coming back, who listens to this podcast and has continued to listen and support this podcast over the last 5 or 6 years. And I don't keep exact count, but I'd say high 50s, low 60s. I mean, I know I've been around the block and all, but 306 episodes. Some were indeed 2 at a time. Thank you for your support. It genuinely means so much. And yes, I have been waiting to use those quotes in this episode. And honestly, I'm so pleased with myself right now. It's not quite the exact quote in the movie, but when he says 5, she says 6, and he says 5 or 6, I was like, that just like works so well. Anyway, I'm delighted to have you here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your continued support. It really does mean the world. And this, again, is an episode that has been a long time coming to this podcast. I cannot tell you how long Mr. and Mrs. Smith has been on the roster. Well, actually, I can, in fact, tell you, because I watched this movie back in 2021. And I know this because I record it on my Letterboxd. And I looked at the review that I put on my Letterboxd in 2021. And in 2021, it says something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing here, should do this on the podcast soon. And that was 2021. So 4 years later, it's finally on the podcast. But this has just been one of those movies that's just continually been pushed in favour of other stuff. And I thought, you know what, finally, let's get down to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because this movie is fun, but it's got problems, and we're going to talk about it. The last episode was on Tombstone, my very first Western, would you believe? And I absolutely loved working on Tombstone. Some movies are just perfect examples of why this podcast even exists, to celebrate everything about movie making, but also how difficult it can be in Hollywood to get stuff made. The fact it exists at all, with all its various troubles, is miraculous. But also the fact that someone was trying to sabotage it And that sabotage only seemed to strengthen it. It's just such a brilliant, interesting story, and I'm so happy to have done that episode on Tombstone. Obviously, moving this week to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this production had a whole different set of problems. The Hollywood celebrity rumour mill in the 2000s was unfiltered, it was bold, and it was brash. Everyone was dating everyone else, everyone was either too fat or too thin, there were pregnancy rumours galore. Even though everyone knows, you don't assume things like this. And one of the most beautiful couples of the early 2000s was Brad Pitt and his stunning wife Jennifer Aniston. Apart, they were two of the most glamorous, beautiful, and successful people in the world. Together, they were a phenomenon, never before matched. All that changed when Brad Pitt filmed his new action spy comedy movie. Here's the trailer for Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
They are the world's most deadly assassins. Their identities are a secret, even from each other.
So how's work?
We had a little trouble with the commission. So how's Atlanta?
What, are you looking for a job or something?
You are the job. Had a few problems ourselves. Did you do something new?
I added peas.
Ah, peas. I love my wife, but there are times.
There's this huge space between us, and it just keeps filling up with everything that we don't say to each other.
What do you think she learned to shoot like that?
Looks like it's government or something.
You've just been identified by a competing agent. How are you gonna handle it?
I'm gonna borrow this.
Yeah.
Sweetheart.
Love gets lethal.
You have an unusual problem, Jane. You obviously want me dead. And I'm less and less concerned for your well-being. So what do we do?
From the director of The Bourne Identity,
Come on, sweetheart. Come to daddy.
Who's your daddy now?
Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie,
Still alive, baby?
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
You know that you're ticking.
John and Jane Smith are a seemingly ordinary suburban married couple who have grown bored and distant in their relationship. Unbeknownst to each other, they are both highly skilled assassins working for competing agencies. When they are independently assigned to eliminate the same target, their secret identities are exposed and they discover that their next mission is to kill each other. What follows is an escalating battle of wits and weaponry as the married assassins use their professional skills against one another, ultimately forcing them to confront both their crumbling marriage and their deadly careers while trying to survive their employers' attempts to eliminate them both. Let's run through the cast of this movie. We all know who's in this movie, but we're going to have to talk about it. We have Brad Pitt as John Smith, Angelina Jolie as Jane Smith, Vince Vaughn as Eddie, Adam Brody as Benjamin the Tank Dans, Kerry Washington as Jasmine, Keith David as Father, Chris Weitz as Martin Coleman, Michelle Monaghan as Gwen, and Angela Bassett, uncredited, as Atlanta. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was written by Simon Kinberg and was directed by Doug Liman. It's safe to say that screenwriter Simon Kinberg has had somewhat of a meteoric rise in Hollywood. Graduating from the Columbia University School of the Arts in 2003, he'd already sold pitches to major studios while still in film school, including Ghouls of New York in his first year, which sold for 6 figures. Ghouls of New York connected Kinberg to the industry, and his thesis project would become the script for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which he sold to Summit Entertainment for 6 figures in 2000 and wrote an initial treatment in January 2001. Bear in mind, he didn't graduate from Columbia till 2003. Kinberg has worked on some of the biggest movies of the 2000s as a writer, producer, and sometimes both. He got involved in Fox's X-Men prequel series in the early 2010s, writing and producing Days of Future Past, and Apocalypse, and writing, producing, and directing Dark Phoenix. He also produced The Martian, Cinderella, Deadpool, Logan, and most recently Edgar Wright's 2025 The Running Man reboot. He was the highest paid screenwriter in Hollywood in 2016, earning $16 million for 2 X-Men scripts, and one of the highest paid producers in Hollywood, thanks to Deadpool. His first screenwriting credit was a sequel to the hit action film Triple X State of the Union, which came out 2 months before Mr. and Mrs. Smith in April 2005. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was not, as many think, a remake of the 1996 one-season TV show of the same name, which premiered in September 1996 on CBS in the US, starring Scott Bakula and Maria Bello as 2 spies brought together to pose as a married couple working for a secretive organisation called The Factory. Only 9 of its produced 13 episodes were ever aired before it was cancelled. Despite featuring the same name and a passingly familiar premise, Simon Kinberg's script for the 2005 Mr. and Mrs. Smith is classified as an original screenplay. Kinberg would say the idea came from hearing about 2 friends in marriage counselling, nor is the movie a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's 1941 movie of the same name, just FYI. The original pairing that producers had in mind for this movie were Brad Pitt and Nicole Kidman. Pitt signed on, he had director approval, and while other directors like John Woo, David Fincher, Michael Mann and Guy Ritchie were considered, Pitt really wanted to work with Doug Liman. Liman was sent the script in 2002, didn't think it was perfect for him, but he liked it and had a strong point of view on it. Doug Liman wanted to work with Nicole Kidman. Nicole Kidman then signed on to the movie, but scheduling conflicts with the Stepford Wives running 2.5 months behind schedule led to her leaving Mr. and Mrs. Smith without a female lead. And just imagine how different the world would be if Kidman had starred in this movie. Without Kidman, though, Pitt also left the movie. Literal Mr. Smith, Will Smith, was considered, Catherine Zeta-Jones was considered, the pairing of Johnny Depp and Cate Blanchett was considered, but Depp was exhausted and Blanchett was filming The Aviator. They also considered getting Brad Pitt back and pairing him with his ex-girlfriend Gwyneth Paltrow in an art-imitating life scenario of ex-lovers playing a married couple who hate each other. Can you imagine how awkward that would have been? Aishwarya Rai was approached, but she was uncomfortable with the amount of passion shown on screen. Gwen Stefani also auditioned and famously mentioned in an interview that she was beaten to the role by Angelina Jolie. Now, Angelina Jolie was on the up and up after winning an Academy Award in 2000 for Girl Interrupted and starring in 2 Lara Croft Tomb Raider movies, both of which have an episode on this podcast. Doug Liman became interested in casting Jolie, and as soon as Jolie joined the cast, Brad Pitt returned to the project. Which brings me to Doug Liman. He'd grown up in a wealthy family, the son of an attorney, and he wanted to be a filmmaker, something that his father helped to fund until his father threatened to cut him off financially in 1995. Now, his father didn't cut him off, and what he ended up doing was helping secure funding for Liman's directorial debut, which was 1996's Swingers, which had been written by his friend Jon Favreau. The movie was a big success in the film festival circuit and caught the eye of notorious bad guy and criminal Harvey Weinstein, who offered $5.5 million for the rights to Swingers. Let's just say it was a sore point between Liman and Favreau, because Favreau did not make $5.5 million off of Swingers, despite it being his idea and his script. Now, to say Liman's directorial style is chaotic is somewhat of an understatement. On The Bourne Identity, a movie that I go into in episode 263, his rebellious, almost relaxed, aloof style of directing annoyed a lot of people in high places who claimed he wasted studio money on his own amusement. After spending years obtaining the rights to Bourne, developing it, fighting to get it filmed, Liman was fired and Paul Greengrass was brought in to replace him on the Bourne Supremacy. So basically, instead of a Bourne movie, Doug Liman worked on this movie instead. Reportedly, the script for this movie was rewritten 50 times, with the original being much funnier than what ended up on screen. Several writers contributed to rewrites, including famed script doctor Carrie Fisher, Terence Winter, Jez and John Henry Butterworth, Akiva Goldsman, Ted Griffin, and Kieran and Michelle Mulroney. Despite the rewrites, Kinberg retains sole screenplay credit. Lyman knew that Brad Pitt was lined up to work on Ocean's 12 at the end of April 2004, and so filming had to start in January 2004. But they couldn't agree a stop date, which delayed the start of filming Mr. and Mrs. Smith, ironically. By April, though, Pitt had to leave for Chicago for Steven Soderbergh's film. This ended up leading to 3 separate shooting schedules: January to April 2004, August to October 2004, and 4 days in March 2005, which is where A New Ending was allegedly shot. One of the first scenes in the movie would cause issues after its release, though, as we flash back to John and Jane meeting in Colombia, specifically Bogota. For this scene, instead of filming an aerial shot of Bogota, they used previously filmed footage from another movie, the 1994 action movie Clear and Present Danger, which stars Harrison Ford. They added some CG explosions, burning buildings, and a person in the back of the helicopter. But the problem was that it isn't Bogota. A quick Google image search shows you that this isn't Bogota. Bogota is a high-altitude city in the Andes with booming skyscrapers, not a tiny village with a hot, humid climate. Clear and Present Danger actually filmed this shot in rural Mexico. When the shot was recycled for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the Colombian government publicly criticised the production for misrepresenting Bogota. A letter was sent from the Secretary General of Bogota's Mayor's Office, Enrique Borda, to Doug Lyman and producer Arnold Mitchum, condemning the demonstration of, quote, a complete level of ignorance by portraying Bogota as incipient, showing, quote, a backward capital with little hotel infrastructure, where poverty prevails, depressed, disorderly, with high levels of violence, ultimately totally chaotic and unattractive, unquote. Borda also invited the director, producer, and stars to visit Bogota to experience the city in all its glory. It's not known if anyone took the chance to take a trip to Colombia, but a little bit of due diligence as to whether the scene depicted Bogota probably wouldn't have gone amiss. But there's likely a good reason how the Bogota thing was missed. The press intrusion and paparazzi trying to get photos from this particular shoot was insane. Not so much at the start, but rumours of Jolie and Pitt's growing intimacy on and off the set was suddenly a hot topic in May 2004, specifically in an issue of Us magazine. When the second shoot started in August 2004, paparazzi snapped the 2 stars looking smitten with each other, with PR reps saying that they were just in character, but by the time the third shoot started in March 2005, Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston had announced their separation, and the media was having a field day, dubbing the pair Brangelina and printing Team Aniston and Team Jolie t-shirts. And of course everyone focused on the women in this situation and not the man. But mostly the blame for the separation was levied at Angelina Jolie as the quote-unquote other woman. She was single at the time, having divorced Billy Bob Thornton in 2003. Pitt was the one who was married. Helicopters would follow the pair, and the going rate for a paparazzi shot of Pitt and Jolie together was allegedly $300,000. Paparazzi used a scanner to listen to on-set walkie-talkies, and so they had to be careful how they referred to Pitt and Jolie when on set. Producer Lucas Foster erected a crane so that photographers in a hotel room couldn't get that coveted shot of Pitt and Jolie together acting out a scene. But the crane was also blocking the camera shot, so it had to be edited out in post. Brangelina became the hot topic of conversation in gossip magazines and online. Even the stars' trailers had to be moved on set to avoid the paparazzi lenses. The pair's sex scene had to be carefully edited, mostly to get the coveted PG-13 rating, but also to avoid alienating the audience, who may be huge Jennifer Aniston fans and think Jolie and Pitt were really getting down to it, and it was too sexy. And here's the thing, no woman can seduce a man away. Men are going to leave if they want to leave. But Angelina Jolie at the time was labelled as the seductress. Jennifer Aniston was the girl next door. This was the epitome of the Madonna Hall complex. And no one knows what really happened at the time. And to be honest, both women have been pretty respectful as time has gone on. But even the music in the scene had to be questioned as to whether it was too sexy. Doug Lyman had to fight for the Joe Strummer song Mondo Bongo. And the thing was, Angelina Jolie was incredibly sexy. She was noted as being very comfortable with her sexuality, very open about what she liked. And both of these actors were playing against type in the movie, with Jolie playing the suburban housewife and Pitt with the weapons-filled garden shed. At the time, Pitt was more of a homemaker into interior design and probably wanting to buy similar curtains, and Jolie was more knowledgeable about knives and guns, joining in with the prop guys' show and tell about weapons. But obviously, nevertheless, filming did continue. The exterior shots of the Smith residence were filmed at 1565 San Pasqual Street in Pasadena, California. The restaurant and dance club scenes were filmed at the Chicada Restaurant and Club on Olive Street in downtown Los Angeles. The exteriors of the construction site were filmed at Caltrans District 7 headquarters in downtown LA's Main Street. And additional scenes were filmed at the Quality Coffee Shop on 7th Street in downtown LA and Vincent St. Thomas Bridge in San Pedro, California. Jane Smith's office at I-10 was filmed at 570 Lexington Avenue in New York, and filming also took place in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And this being a Doug Liman movie, as well as taking into account Pitt's contractual commitments to Ocean's 12, stopping and starting the shoot twice, plus reshoots, unsurprisingly, this movie became expensive. Lyman's textbook disorganised shooting would lead to new sets being built at the last minute and anywhere between 30 to 50 alternative endings being written. It all led to Mr. and Mrs. Smith coming in $26 million over budget. While the Smith family home was indeed a real house in Pasadena and is still a real house in Pasadena, it obviously wasn't actually blown up in real life. The actors filmed the live-action plate of them reacting to the house exploding, but the production actually blew up a model version of the house and then added CG debris. Terence Stamp and Jacqueline Bisset were originally cast as the villains, and a showdown ending was filmed that was never used. Once the ending with Stamp and Bisset was discarded, another ending was filmed, this time with Keith David and Angela Bassett being revealed to be the villains fighting against John and Jane. While Keith David ended up with a credited role as father in the film, Bassett is uncredited as the voice of John Smith's boss, Atlanta. Lyman would say in an interview that it was important to not give that final resolution, because you don't just fight for your marriage and then stop fighting. So the big boss reveal was scrapped, and they reshot scenes with the marriage therapist played off-screen by William Fichtner. There was also a potential lawsuit by author Gavin Bishop, writer of The Secret Lives of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a children's book about a couple who left each morning. He pretended to go to the office, she pretended to do housework, but they were both actually spies. The book was first published in 1997, and while on a layover in Los Angeles in 2005, his wife spotted a billboard for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, starring Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. 6 months later, the film came out in their native Christchurch, and his wife was adamant that it was an adaptation of his book, and everyone started congratulating him on this adaptation. So Bishop decided to speak to a lawyer to file a copyright suit. However, he was advised taking on 20th Century Fox, Regency, Summit and Weed Road Pictures would probably be incredibly expensive, and there was no guarantee that a small New Zealand author would win, and so the plagiarism accusations went no further. And this is the perfect time to segue into the obligatory Keanu reference of this episode. And if you don't know what that is, it's where I try and link the movie that I'm featuring with Keanu Reeves, for no reason other than he is the best of men, as I'm going to prove later. Now, if Speed taught us anything, it's that relationships that start under intense circumstances never last. And I think this movie is the perfect example of that, other than Speed, obviously, which is the other perfect example of that. Because, spoiler alert, the relationship that started under the intense circumstances of this movie didn't last. But before we get into all of that, I just want to mention the score by John Powell and also the song Express Yourself, the Messian Worker remix by Charles Wright and the Watts 103rd Street Rhythm Band. Always reminds me of the fight scene in this movie. There is some songs that just take you straight to a particular scene in a movie, and that song always takes me to this movie. Now, whether you see it as a blessing or a curse, the movie basically marketed itself with the whole Brangelina thing. Though they both denied an on-set relationship, they later admitted they fell in love while filming. In March 2005, Jennifer Aniston filed for divorce from Brad Pitt. and the Brangelina train went into overdrive. Mr. and Mrs. Smith released on the 10th of June 2005, the same week as Batman Begins, but the Smiths beat that movie into submission and Batman had to settle for third place, with the Smiths at first just ahead of Madagascar. Batman soon overtook it though, and by its second week, Mr. and Mrs. Smith had to make do with second place. Mr. and Mrs. Smith would stay in the top 10 for 6 weeks, and despite it being an expensive movie to make, costing $110 million, $40 million of which paid for Pitt and Jolie, they both received $20 million each, Mr. and Mrs. Smith grossed $186.3 million domestically in the US and $301 million internationally, for a total worldwide gross of $487.3 million. At the time, it was the highest grossing film for both Pitt and Jolie, but that's since been surpassed. It would go on to become the 7th highest grossing film of 2005 worldwide. By July 2005, Pitt and Jolie were spotted on holiday together in Kenya with Jolie's son. They then took part in a huge photo shoot for W magazine in July 2005, titled Domestic Bliss, depicting them as a happy couple, which outraged fans who were very much in the Team Jen camp. When Jolie travelled to Ethiopia the same month to adopt her eldest daughter, Pitt accompanied her on the trip. All the while, Mr. and Mrs. Smith was still out in cinemas and still doing business, and the celebrity magazines are having the best time, selling hundreds of thousands of copies purely based on the phenomenon of Brangelina, while also still blaming Jennifer Aniston for not wanting children and making him leave. You cannot make this up. Not that it's anyone's business, but Aniston later confirmed she was experiencing fertility issues at the time. 3 months after Pitt and Aniston's divorce was finalised, in January 2006, Jolie and Pitt announced they were expecting a baby, and Pitt legally adopted her 2 eldest children. Rotten Tomatoes has it at a score of 60%, with a consensus reading, although this action romance suffers from weak writing and one too many explosions, the chemistry generated by on-screen couple Pitt and Jolie is palpable enough to make this a thoroughly enjoyable summer action flick, which is a pretty accurate description, actually. The chemistry in this movie is absolutely top-notch and remains completely brilliant, but the writing is very weak. A sequel to this movie was discussed with Pitt and Jolie, but they were dissatisfied with the story ideas, which mostly revolved around the couple separating yet again, or the couple now with children. There was an unused ending for Mr. and Mrs. Smith that had the characters of John and Jane interacting with a young daughter. In 2007, a pilot for a spin-off TV series was written by Simon Kinberg and directed by Doug Liman, set 6 months after the end of the movie. The roles of John and Jane were played by Martin Henderson and Jordana Brewster, but the network decided not to commission the series. And obviously, we got the Amazon Prime series Mr. and Mrs. Smith, starring Donald Glover and Maya Erskine, which I saw a few episodes of and I actually thought was a lot of fun. I liked their chemistry. But as a long-form show, it was obviously very different to the source material. The series has since been renewed for a 2nd season. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a fun, silly movie that never pretends to be anything but. However, any chat about this movie can't ignore the real-life relationship that played out behind the scenes and what happened to Brangelina. Now, I try to avoid celebrity gossip on this podcast, but because it intertwines so deeply with this movie, the history of this movie and the legacy of this movie, it's hard not to get into it. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a fascinating time capsule of a moment in 2005 when 2 people met, fell in love, however they claim it happened, and then, in life depicting art, started to resent each other, hate each other, and viciously fight with each other. A fight that has played out in multiple lawsuits. Unlike the movie, there was no happy ever after together, but instead, it's apart. We're never going to know what truly happened with their relationship, but it all plays out here on screen. A story of initial attraction, intense chemistry, lust, despite all the while pretending to be something they're not, i.e. acting, the grandiose celebrity of it all, followed by the mundanity of the relationship. The spark is gone. It was the general public's fascination with Brangelina that made audiences see this movie, to see this partnership sizzle on screen, and it really does sizzle. From this movie, a marriage ended, a relationship started, which presumably started out very loving and supportive, and 6 children came of it, followed by another marriage and another divorce. That's some legacy for any movie, but it's also somewhat tainted. In August 2016, Angelina Jolie filed for divorce from Brad Pitt, citing irreconcilable differences. Trigger warning for a brief mention of domestic abuse, so please skip ahead 1 minute if you'd rather not hear stuff. But Brad Pitt may have been the homemaker in 2005, but fast forward a decade or so, he's really not. While irreconcilable differences was the official reason, Angelina Jolie also filed court papers accusing Brad Pitt of allegedly drunkenly attacking her and their children on a private plane. In a lawsuit over Chateau Miraval, a home and vineyard in the south of France that the former couple owned, Jolie alleged that while on the flight, Pitt grabbed her by the head, pulled her into the plane bathroom and threw her against the bathroom wall, as well as verbally abused and poured alcohol on his family during the flight from France to LA. He also punched the plane ceiling numerous times. He also allegedly lunged at one of the children who was trying to protect their mother, allegedly grabbing one of his children by the throat and striking another child in the face. The 6 children were aged between 8 and 15 at the time. The incident was investigated by the FBI in 2016, but authorities decided not to press charges. It's worth adding that Pitt has always denied Jolie's accusations of abuse. It's with this knowledge that the legacy of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, with all its sexy chemistry and passion, also conveys a level of violence that also feels eerily prescient, knowing Jolie's accusations of spousal abuse and the fact that 3 of his own children had publicly denounced him by removing the surname Pitt from their names and retaining the Jolie part, which speaks volumes about how they feel about their father's actions towards their mother. A post on Instagram on Father's Day in 2020 by Pitt and Jolie's second eldest son, then 16 years old, speaks volumes, calling his father a world-class a-hole. Pitt has never commented about the allegations or about his relationship with his children, but has been open about his drinking and drug use. In a May 27 GQ interview, Pitt revealed he'd quit drinking and smoking cannabis, so at least he's taking steps to be clean and sober. Adam Brody, who I've barely mentioned, nor have I even really mentioned Kerry Washington, who deserves way better than this movie gives her, and Vince Vaughn, who interestingly isn't listed at all in the end title card credits, but is in the actual list of credits. Brody's character Benjamin the Tank Dans can be seen wearing a Fight Club t-shirt while being questioned by John Smith, which is an obvious shout-out to one of Brad Pitt's most famous movies. It does beg the question of who stars in Fight Club in this universe, but this is a movie you don't really question, because if you do, you realise it makes no sense. I really like this movie. I've seen it several times since it came out, but it hits differently now, no pun intended. The characters of John and Jane are clearly written by a man, in that John is allowed to be comedic, whereas Jane is given very little in the way of personality that's not stuck-up demanding wife. That bugs me. Also, the plot holes infuriate me a little. You're telling me this is 2 of the best spy agencies in the world, competing in the same city, they know of each other's existence, but have no idea that their top 2 agents are married? And when they met, they didn't do extensive background checks on each other? And the companies just let their agent marry someone who they hadn't checked? And John's agency didn't know that the guy paid to act like Jane's father was actually an actor? And after the shootout at IKEA, it's not IKEA, but it looks like an IKEA, there's no repercussions. They just go back to the agencies who were trying to kill them, or they destroyed both agencies, or they're still being pursued and just find the time to have lots of sex and go to couples therapy while being hunted. This movie is infuriating, not to mention the fact they both go out late into the evening. John gets drunk, plays poker and gets lucky, while Jane assassinates an arms dealer dressed in black leather and fishnets. Ab sails down the building, gets into a taxi, great shot by the way, I love it. But then both are back, ready to go to their neighbour's party straight after. And we know it's straight after because Jane is still wearing the black fishnet tights. Make the timeline work. Anyway, it's crazy to me that one tiny change in this movie Will Smith as John, or Nicole Kidman as Jane, and the whole Brangelina craze ceases to exist. The butterfly effect of this movie is huge. One small decision changed so many lives and created new ones. And now Mr. and Mrs. Smith exists on TV, slightly different, but more fleshed out. That reminds me, I should definitely finish season 1. Thank you for listening. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and thank you for your continued support of this podcast. If you want to help this podcast grow and reach more people, you could tell your friends and family about this podcast or about this episode. You can leave a rating or review wherever you found this podcast, or you can find me, follow me at Verbal Diorama across social media, where you can like posts, share posts, and comment on posts. It all helps. If you like this episode on Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you might also like episode 249, which was one of those 2 at a time episodes that I mentioned earlier, which is on Lara Croft Tomb Raider and Lara Croft Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life. And also check out episode 263 on the Bourne Identity, because that goes into a little bit more of Doug Liman and the Doug Liman of everything. Some of his movies are genuinely terrific. Edge of Tomorrow is still one of the most underrated gems of sci-fi that I think ever exists. But that was a fun episode, so if you enjoyed this one, you'll also enjoy that one. As always, give me feedback. Let me know what you think of my episode recommendations. So the next episode, Akiva Goldsman would be a producer on Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And in 1994, he would break through in screenwriting with The Client, an adaptation of John Grisham's novel of the same name, directed by Joel Schumacher. In 1995, he would write Batman Forever, starring last episode's superstar Val Kilmer, also directed by Joel Schumacher. He then worked with Schumacher for a third time, writing A Time to Kill. But in 1997, Goldsman collaborated with Joel Schumacher for a fourth time on the topic of the next episode. It starred George Clooney, Chris O'Donnell, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Uma Thurman, and Alicia Silverstone. The episode I did last year on Batman Forever was a huge success, one of the biggest episodes of the year. And so it makes complete sense to do what I set out to do originally and finish the original Batman quadrilogy with Batman and Robin. So join me next week for the history and legacy of that campy thrill ride that is Batman and Robin. If you enjoy what I do for this podcast and you want to support an indie podcaster who does literally everything on her own, if you have some spare change, you can financially contribute to the upkeep of this podcast. This podcast is free and it always will be free, so you're under no obligation. However, if you get value and you have the means to help, there are a couple of ways you can help. You can make a one-off donation at verbaldiorama.com/tips, or you can subscribe to the Patreon at verbaldiorama.com/Patreon. All money goes back into this podcast by paying for software subscriptions, website hosting, or new equipment. And as always, huge thanks to the incredible patrons of this podcast: Simon, Laurel, Derek, Kat, Andy, Mike, Luke, Michael, Scott, Brendan, Ian, Lisa, Sam, Jack, Dave, Stuart, Nicholas So, Kev, Heather, Danny, Stu, Brett, Philip M, Zenos, Sean, Rhino, Philip K, Adam, Elaine, Kyle, and Aaron. If you want to get in touch, you can email verbaldiorama@gmail.com. You can say hello, you can give me feedback or suggestions, or just go to verbaldiorama.com and fill out the little contact form. I would really love to hear from you for any episode of this podcast. But if you enjoyed Mr. and Mrs. Smith, feel free to get in touch and let me know. And finally,
Doing all right, aren't we? I mean, listen, I'm not gonna lie to you. There were times I just wanted to kill her, but
Likewise.
couldn't take the shot.
That's a good sign.
Who would've thought?
Sometimes you have to battle through.
That's marriage, right?
Yeah, you take your best shot, and
Oh, we redid the house.
we did. Yes, we did.
You know, there will always be challenges. Threats out there.
Yep.
But you can handle it together.
So far.
Yes, we can. So far? What is that?
Leaving room for the unknown.
So far.
And do you feel that your relationship styles are more conducive to the
Ask
free
us the
flow?
sex question.
Well, that.
Fine.
Movies you know.